Wonderful. X out of all these things we don't need. Welcome. Throw in the chat box name and where you're calling in from. And if it was a coffee or tea morning. See if I can find the chat box. Josh, tea today. Likewise, kind of double hitting green tea and kombucha tea. Barbara, calling in from Anchorage, sipping some coffee. Mary in La Fortuna, Costa Rica. Oh, okay, we're all collectively highly jealous of you right now. Wow. Oh, Alex has had 6 mini cups of tea. Yes, she would. Oh, I lost my little mini teacup. I guess I took it to the other house too. Christine, Anchorage coffee. All right, Monica, tea in Fairbanks. Josh, good morning from Prince Rupert, BC. Wonderful. It's great to have you. Rose is having her Columbia coffee. Steve in Yellowknife. Wonderful. Neither tea nor coffee. That's awesome. Are you drinking lots of water? That is what we also should be having. Got it. Ready to go. Okay. See Joe calling in from Portland. Green tea. We have obviously, yeah, you're either coffee or a lot of green tea drinkers here. Tia Metlakatla, coffee this morning. OJ. Nice, Tonya. Marlene, Ottawa. Fred, hello. Definitely coffee in Oregon. And we all want to be in Costa Rica. Oh, you're in Juneau. Okay, sweet. Wow, awesome. Well, so Joe, who else are we having representation-wise from the Alaska Conservation Foundation? Is there anybody else?
Erin is here today.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Great.
Morning, everybody. Nice to see you.
Nice. Okay, well, let's get this party started. Do we have all of my panelists? I am trying to view all things. Let's see. Well, there we are. I think we do have many of our panelists. So we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so Erin, I'm going to ask that you just do a quick introduction and then we'll roll into our agenda as planned. Does that work for you?
Sure, that works. Hi, good morning, everybody. It's Aaron Poe. I'm calling in from Dagaikuk, Anchorage, Dena'ina lands. And yeah, work with CJO here at Alaska Conservation Foundation, specifically with the group, the Northern Latitudes Partnerships. We're excited to be able to pull some awesome panelists together, and just a shout out to some of my friends, and particularly the Arctic Funders Collaborative is a group of about, I think it's a dozen or so foundations that fund largely community-driven efforts in the North. So pulling Fred and Steve in from that crew, really appreciate that. And then through our connections and kind of Northern Latitudes partnerships, we're able to reach out to Elisa and to Marlene, and I think Marin, I think, is here too. Maybe I'm not seeing everybody on my screen. Kind of from the government side of things too. I know a lot of the folks on the phone here are pretty active in terms of government grants. So excited for these folks to be able to share their knowledge with you all this morning.
Excellent. All right. Well, as you all, I guess our funder panelists don't know this, but how we always start our coaching calls are with a moment to breathe, meditate, ground ourselves so we can let go of our inbox, let go of whatever we're doing, and come into the present moment with our call. So I have my co-founder, Alex Lustig, on the line. She is the one that's actually magical at doing this, and she's going to guide us through a grounding activity. Go ahead, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks for letting me join and do this with you all. So if you want to, I invite you to close your eyes. You don't have to, but if you would like to close your eyes, go ahead and close them. Feel, if you're standing or sitting, your feet firmly plant into the ground. Feel that you are connected to the earth, even if that's through a hardwood floor or some carpet. Just feel that you are connected to this earth. And at the same time you feel that grounding sensation in your feet, feel like the top of your head is being lifted up to the sky. You can kind of feel the tension of being connected upwards to the sky, being connected to the ground. We're searching for that balance where we're not too high and we're not too grounded. Okay, we're going to breathe in through our nose. And then you're going to breathe out through your mouth and let it go with a giant sigh. You can even move your body if you want and just let it go. Take another giant deep breath in through our nose. Then as you let it go, really sigh it out. Let it all go. Okay, now we'll breathe in through our nose for the count of 3. 3, and breathe out for a count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to breathe in through our nose to the count of 3. 1, 3, and breathe out for 5 through our nose. 1, 3, 5. Okay, I encourage you to continue doing that. You can change up the length of your breaths. Just make sure your exhale is always a slightly longer than your inhale. And as you breathe, I really invite you to think about all of the things that may be happening in the world around you. So I know that when we come to this seat, to this session, to our work day, that we're bringing in all the other things that make us a human being on this earth. We're bringing in news articles that we were listening to or reading. We're bringing in maybe family dynamics that we're stressed about, or we're happy about, or we're joyful about. Maybe we're bringing in something else from a part of work. I want you to think about all of those things that are happening external to this moment. And on your next out breath, let those go. You can either send them through your feet to the ground, just put them into the earth, send them out. Or you can also send them out through your head and into the sky. Let them go into the sky, into the wind, and be free. For this next hour, you get to carve out time for yourself. And that is really, really special. And I think often in life, it's hard to come into this moment and say, I can carve this out for me and be here now. So I welcome you on your next inhale to really feel here. Be thankful that you are carving out this hour for yourself. Be thankful that you are with all of these amazing people in this cohort and our panelists today. And on your next out breath, send that gratitude and that feeling of being present and letting all that other stuff go. Feel that in our bodies. You can also send that gratitude out to the rest of the people on this call. All right, take one more giant inhale. One more giant exhale. Begin to flutter your eyes open, maybe put some movement back into your body. Welcome to your funding panel. This is so exciting. Thank you for carving out the time to be here.
Thank you, Alex. As always, that was great. If you appreciated that little session from Alex, give her her love language is words of affirmation. So we'll give her an emoji in the chat box. If you enjoy grounding into the present moment, I know it's something that I'm working on this year. Cool. Sweet. Well, let's get with it. So we're going to do panelist lightning round to get to know them before we do some intros. Then we'll do some hot potato funder panelist questions where we're a bit round robbing a little bit in terms of some sort of quick questions, and we can bounce back and forth and see what everyone has to say. And then we'll wrap it up from there with some open Q&A if you had something that you wanted to ask that we didn't cover. Okay, we did ask our panelists to bring a symbol that was motivating their work. And so I'd love if we could start with, I'm going to pull up my panel list. If you brought an item, Elisa, would you be willing to share what object you chose to bring today that inspired the work you do as a funder?
Yes, thank you all for inviting me into this space and the opportunity to be here. And thanks, Alex, for your awesome meditation. It definitely helps to start out meetings that way, especially, only having an hour of our time to dedicate to this type of stuff. So thank you so much. So my name, just so you know, is pronounced Elisa. I'm Elisa.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Okay. I'm from the Bureau of Indian Affairs Tribal Climate Resilience Program. So I brought my grandma's hair clip. It's beaded, and it's one of the only couple of items I have of my grandma. She was half Chippewa and half Cree, and I think the first time, so I was given this as a child, but the first time I ever wore it was as an adult, a couple of years ago at a Native Youth Community Adaptation and Leadership Congress. And the day that I wore it, another woman who was from my tribe gifted me with her grandma's ribbon skirt. And so that, I felt like that was a symbol to me, a significant happening that my grandma was telling me that what I'm doing, she supports it, and that right now what I'm doing is good. And so I do this work because of the people that it supports and the people that benefit from it. In one way or another. The benefits that we see from this work aren't always super quick to appear. It's all planning and preparedness at this point. And so we know that the benefits are going to be long-term, but anyhow, I guess it's just that my roots are tied to the roots of the people who I work to support. In some way or another. So
thank you, Elisa. That's a beautiful artifact to bring to inspire the work that you're doing. And thank you for the story. Cool. Marlene Doyle, and I will formally introduce you all in a moment, but just for now, the symbol that's motivating your work.
Hi, everyone. I had to think about this one a little bit and finally had a bit of a brainwave this morning when I thought to bring a toonie, which symbolizes change. Some Canadian change. I've got the quarter and a nickel and a dime here as well. And so those objects are supposed to symbolize the change we're trying to seed within the communities by empowering Indigenous peoples as leaders in gathering the knowledge, using their Indigenous knowledge systems and science to understand the impacts that climate's having on their communities and develop the strategies they need to adapt to those realities. So change.
I love it. Sometimes it's the simplest of objects that can have the greatest of symbolism. I'll never forget Alexis Swenson is on the line right now. She's part of our team. She coordinated with you all funders. And I even remember what she brought when we did this as a team activity. She brought her running shoes. And I never would have thought, a running shoe could be a symbol of the work we do. Do we have Marin Smith on?
I think Alexis maybe just shared with me in a side chat. She had a family emergency this morning, so wasn't able to join.
That's fine. I thought that could have been the case. I just didn't know for sure since it's a lot of panels to see. No problem. All right. How about Steve Ellis from the MakeWay Foundation?
Hi, everybody. So I completely cheated. I didn't bring an object. I brought a picture, which obviously...
That's an object.
but it speaks for many things. It's 1,000 words, as they say. So this is a picture of my son wearing the red shirt, his little cousin, Cairo, with the little toy boat, and Cairo's uncle. And this is on the shores of Great Slave Lake up in the Northwest Territories. If you just follow the shoreline around the corner, that's the house where we started our little family. You can't see it here. But this is a very pristine, beautiful area of the world. It's one of the first places that's been designated an Indigenous protected area in Canada. It's a place that's now governed and stewarded by Indigenous peoples as it always has been, but now formally and recognized by Canadian governments and so on and so forth. And I really like this picture because it's about what we're trying to make sure can happen 1,000 years from now, which is that these sort of activities can happen, that you can still drink from this water, that this intergenerational knowledge exchange and joy can still occur going forward. So this is the picture that I always drag out when asked what I'm doing, what this work is all about for me.
That was beautiful. Thank you for that. And we loved having a visual of this with the photo held up as you shared that story. Thanks, Fred. Fantastic. All right, so we have our panelists then. Let's do a very quick lightning round. I'm going to go back to Elisa.
Did we skip Fred?
Did I skip Fred?
You skipped Fred.
Oh my gosh, sorry, Fred. I was looking right at your bio as Steve was speaking. My bad. Sorry, Fred. You deserve better. Fred, where are you? And you're welcome to share your.
I'm here. Hi.
Sorry.
Hi, Meredith. No worries. I was wondering, hey, so like Steve, hey, I can't see myself here. Let's see if.
Yeah, and that scroll left or right of the arrows. We could also, I guess I
Okay, there, I got it.
There you are.
So I also brought a picture. My son gave me this, and it is a picture
Gorgeous.
of the Peel River, a portion of the Peel River watershed in the Yukon. And it was pretty easy to bring because it hangs right above my desk. And the thing that it means to me and reminds me of, our foundation granted money to environmental NGOs and for 13 some years working on land use planning on this area to ultimately protect a big portion of it. And before me, there were people working on that same project for another 20 years. And so the thing that it reminds me is, first of all, no one person does anything. We all do it together, and it takes all of us. And all the really big stuff, it doesn't happen fast. It takes a long time. If it was easy, somebody would have done it already. So that's what this reminds me of.
Yeah, so can we all collectively agree in the chat box that was just like nugget bomb, nugget bomb, nugget bomb? Like, yes, so true. None of us are self-built. It is all a team and collective effort, and especially the things that are worth doing that are not quick wins. And in this day and age where it's all about quick wins, it's important to remember that. Fantastic. So now we have all panelists accounted for. Let's do a super quick lightning round. This will be very quick. Fred, since I left you out, you get to go first. Lucky you. All right, I'm just going to ask these and you just say back to me what is your answer. So dawn or dusk?
Dawn.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Nickname as a child?
Child.
That works. Favorite winter hobby?
Snowshoeing.
Book that you read recently?
I have 4 kids. I don't read.
That's not a thing. A children's book, perhaps. Something that you could eat for a week straight.
Meat.
Nice job. All right, we all learned something a little bit more about Fred. Super meaningful.
More than you wanted to know, really.
Oh, all right, we'll roll backwards. Steve, you're up next. Steve, dawn or dusk?
I wish it was dawn, but it's dusk.
Yeah, get that. Agree. Coffee or tea?
Neither.
Okay. Nickname as a
hot
child?
drinks.
Hot drink. You do?
Yeah, I can't stand hot drinks. Nickname as
Okay,
a
we
child.
all learned something interesting.
I don't think I had a nickname as a child.
Wow. Okay. Maybe we'll have to make one up. Favorite winter hobby?
Hunting.
Okay. Book you read recently?
Probably a kid's book too. So
Yeah.
got some small twins. So yeah.
Nice. Nice. That's exciting.
Yeah.
And something you could eat for a week straight?
Probably that I'll take a cue from the taco, probably Mexican food.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be leading with that, but that's
Yeah.
what came to mind for me.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. All right, Marlene, we'll go from the bottom up for you. Something that you could eat for a week straight?
Indian food.
Nice. A book you read recently?
The Secret Life of Addie LaRue.
Cool. We'll have to look that one up.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite winter hobby?
Skiing.
Cool. Nickname as a child?
Muffin. And it's a
Nice.
nickname that continues to this day.
That's wonderful.
Bill Cohen Muffin.
That's great. Yeah. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Dawn or dusk?
Just like Steve, dusk.
Wonderful. Okay, Elisa, we'll go bottom up as well. So something you could eat for a week straight.
You know, I gotta say Indian tacos.
All right, I think you all are influencing each other. Book that you read recently?
Probably like a technical book about rangeland management.
Maybe not something we'll all be picking up. Favorite winter hobby?
I wish I could say something cool like snowboarding, but probably just strapping on my boots and going on a winter hike.
Yep, that works. Nickname as a child?
Lease.
Cool. Coffee or tea?
Sad to say coffee.
That's all right. Dawn or dusk?
Dawn for sure.
Awesome. All right. Cool. Well, we'll do some very quick intros now that you know the important things about our funder panelists. I'm not sure how, like the bio is good, but really learning what they want to eat for a week is what I always want to know. So Elisa, we'll start with you. So you're serving the U.S. Department of Interior as a natural resource specialist with the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Program. So you've been with this program since you started in 2018, providing national support to tribes in various program capacities, whether that's data and mapping, working with Native youth, and helping, of course, disseminate the funding that you get to touch and influence. And before that, I found it super neat that you graduated from Colorado State University with a degree in rangeland ecology and have previous experience in fire and fuels monitoring, which we all can agree is a growing area of concern, and having worked with tribes in Montana and North Dakota. So you have also done research on the carbon credit market for Alaska Natives and Alaska Native corporations, which I find super interesting and want to know more about. And you've contributed as a technical author for 2 chapters in the recent Status of Tribes and Climate Change Report of 2021. And if you have a chance to post a link to that in the chat box at some point, I think that would be useful. And you are living in your hometown of Arvada, Colorado. Welcome. All right. Marlene manages the Indigenous, it was like, I couldn't fit it all in a slide, so we point to, manages the Indigenous community-based climate monitoring program at the Department of Crown-Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Canada. This program supports First Nations, Inuit, and please tell me if I got this right, Métis? No? I tried to look it up.
It's it's Métis.
Oh,
Métis.
Sweet. It's not what I would have guessed. Okay, from across Canada to track climate and the impact of climate change using Indigenous knowledge systems and science. So she is in the right place for this conversation. And your background is supporting coordinated approaches to ecosystem monitoring and citizen science. And you live in Ottawa, Canada. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. All right, Steve Ellis. Loved your bio, but you grew up twice. Aren't you still growing up? Spent your childhood in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and you had your early forays into the Canadian Shield and prairies, fostering a great love of the land. Appreciate that tremendously. You spent your early childhood in the Lutselk'e, did I say that right? Northwest Territories among the Dene Suline. I think I just messed it up, didn't I? Dene Suline. Please correct me if you need to. And adopted a deep appreciation for the people, land, and culture, which certainly explains why you're here. You and your wife, Tracy, it sounds like you have 4 kids you're raising, working with Indigenous people to address critical land, resource, and governance issues for 15 years. Thank you for coming. Okay, Fred, you're up. So you've spent the last 12 years in the 1980s and 90s running campaigns for an international conservation organization. Then in the 90s and early 2000s, ran 2 different campaigns that raised over 90 million. Oops, I need to move slides, huh? Sorry. Thank you. I think I'm the classic person that can do one thing at a time. I think it's actually all of us, but I just own it. All right, so Fred, sorry about that. And Fred, you've raised over 90 million in private and federal funds to conserve forests in Washington State. And since 2005, you've been the executive director of the 444S. Is that how you do pronounce it? Okay. Foundation, where you grant between 2 and 3 million per year to conservation organizations and First Nations working to conserve wildlands, wildlife, and traditional territories in Northwestern North America. So Fred is also in the right place. Okay, with that, let's roll into our hot potato questions. Where did they go? I guess I'm going to stop sharing and then we'll get to them. Here we go. I'm stopped sharing so we can see all of you. Everyone that's using Zoom, you're welcome to put yourself in the grid view. I think that's a little bit more immersive because we can see each other, but you're also welcome to just have the panel speaker up. All right, so let's hit this one first. So what would be the funding priorities of your respective organizations? Perhaps Steve, you could get started and then we'll go to Fred.
Sure.
What are the funding priorities of your organization?
So real quickly, so MakeWay is pretty diverse, but the Northern program, which I lead, across sort of the Arctic and subarctic regions. Canada has 4 funding priorities: Indigenous cultural revitalization, supporting next generation emerging leaders, land and water stewardship, and sustainable livelihoods. And they're all kind of intermeshed and interrelated for obvious reasons.
Thank you for that. Fred.
So our foundation is a private family foundation that I'm executive director of. It's really a traditional conservation foundation, although they are on a journey learning about First Nations and the importance of cultural revitalization and all of that to conservation and the people who live in the places that we're trying to conserve. So in the North, we work with both environmental NGOs and First Nations, a lot on land use planning, actually, because that's sort of the mechanism at the moment that's being used to conserve big wild areas.
Excellent. Thank you. Elisa.
The role of the BIA Tribal Climate Resilience Program is to enable climate preparedness and resilience across all of the Indian Affairs programs, and then also for all federally recognized tribal nations and Alaska Native villages through both technical and financial assistance. We have some partnerships that help with training and technical assistance. And then we have our annual awards program as our primary financial assistance.
Fantastic. That actually segues well. So Elisa, would you be willing to give an example of a particularly successful project that that program has funded in the past, or and personally fired you up to see get funding and execute?
Well, I would say that in 2019, we received all this influx of relocation, manage, retreat, and protect and place planning type proposals from the Alaska region. And so that was a category of funding that we recently in 2020 was the first year developed that category of funding. And so just seeing the sheer amount of proposals that we get in and the amount that we're now able to fund has been awesome. Specifically, the Chinook Eskimo community received and I hope I'm saying that right. We don't know if we say it right, but we do our best until we're corrected. But the Chinook Eskimo community received one last year for a permafrost vulnerability assessment. And then another, so those are like obviously preliminary to having to deal with, you know, all of the permafrost degradation impacts that they're experiencing. And then another one is Native Village of Deering's preliminary engineering report to address erosion impacts, since erosion is one of the major drivers of having to relocate. So yep. Those are 2 examples.
Extremely important work. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Marlene, would you be willing? I guess I skipped you accidentally, didn't I? Sorry, Marlene, do you want to actually back up and share what the funding priority is of your organization? I think that I need to go in order and not be creative.
Sure. So yeah, I work for the federal government, the government of Canada, and within the Department of Crown-Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada. So I'm speaking specific to our program, but there's many other programs that are targeting Indigenous and Northern communities through the federal government. So it'd be important to kind of make sure you familiarize yourselves with those that fit best within your organization. But I'll speak to our priorities, our program priorities. So that's the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program. And we fund Indigenous-led community-based initiatives. So we're looking for that. That's our priority. Is it coming from the community? Does it link to climate change monitoring, and how does this build capacity for long-term monitoring? And also we're looking at whether Indigenous knowledge systems are being co-applied with scientific approaches and building up community capacity to deliver on both.
Excellent. Would you mind providing an example of a particularly exciting project?
Sure. Yeah. So each of our projects are respond to the community priorities, so they're extremely varied. And do we have many Canadians on the phone? Or on the line?
On the chat
Any
box.
Canadians?
Yeah, we should.
I'm curious to know. I thought maybe it'd be relevant to pick one in your kind of general region. So I thought I'd mention the Tuktoyaktuk Community Corp. So we've provided funding for that project for a few years now, and they have done a great job of working with their community members to engage them. They did a World Cafe. They worked with their elders to identify priority sites for monitoring. They've worked with Aurora Research Institute to develop a tailored training program, and they've got trained monitors out in the land doing collecting lots of data in a pretty rigorous way, and bringing that knowledge back to help communities make some more informed decisions about their day-to-day lives, and also about planning forward for climate realities.
Excellent. Yeah, these have been themes that I know this group has been wanting to get funded. So that's great to know that that was an example you found a lot of energy in. And they added in the chat box where our Canadians are calling in from, so you can go get some other sample locations. Cool. All right. So Steve, would you mind sharing an example of something you really enjoyed getting to fund?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, sometimes the grants that gives us the most excitement are sometimes the smaller ones that result in big impact down the road, that are kind of like that seed of that snowball.
Yeah.
So one I would always reflect back on is 2018, we hosted a very small convening of Indigenous guardian programs across the Canadian North. There's maybe about 12 to 15 participants who are really looking at building these types of programs in their communities. And it was just a small, maybe $15,000, $20,000 grant to a host organization to run this convening. And now, I know 5 years down the road, there's been convenings every year. The last one in 2021 had over 100 participants representing over 24 Indigenous guardian programs, both mature and new across the North. And just recently, a Northern Indigenous Stewardship Network with its own staff and steering committee and governance and programming was launched as sort of a seed out of this thing. So, I think for us, it's really about planting those seeds that inspire kind of the art of the possible, and that allow the peoples of the North to really harness the energy of those things and take it to next level. So that's for us, the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's a beautiful story. I love a snowball story because that's when I think you as funders, that's the most amazing thing that you can do for the world, is your little bit of starting investment and then letting that catalyze forward and leverage so many other resources. Often starting with you is the ones believing in people when it's just an early stage idea. All right, Fred, can you share an example?
Wow, I was so unprepared for this. So I'm going to go with a grant to Steve Ellis, actually, and his Emerging Leaders in the North program. I first met this guy, Dana Tijatram, at Steve brought him to a funder conference and put him up on stage and asked him some real softball questions in front of a bunch of conservation environment funders. And he asked him, well, what are you going to do? You're talking all about cultural revitalization and all of this. What about protecting the environment? He's like, we are the land. When someone needs to be there to protect it, we will be there. And Dana was struggling with recovery at that point. And now anyway, he's chief in Old Crow, Yukon, and one of the major defenders of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, traveling to Washington, D.C., testifying in front of Congress. Amazing speaker. All because Steve picked him out of nowhere and we gave him some money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing and I think I'm coming to appreciate that more now than ever, when you see how little influences at an early stage when we're young, how the impact that can have on your life, and the importance of having those influencing factors so you even know what's possible. So it sounds like the Emerging Leading program is doing that. Really cool. All right, let's move to our next question. This one I'm hoping is a lowball, Fred, lowball one. So I think you can tackle this. What is the biggest pet peeve you have with applications, or a red flag when you see it, so that this group can be sure to avoid that?
My answer is a little bit different. The proposals and applications are important, but on another hand, they almost don't matter. What really matters is relationship with the people who are giving you the money. That's not always necessarily the case. I should speak about private foundations here that are run by people. you need to get to know the people and what they want and what they're interested in and build trust. And that's what we grant on, is basically on trust and on people's results. So you can write the fanciest application in the world, but if I don't know you, it's not going to make a difference. So I would encourage you to get to know the people you're asking for money from, and then go from that relationship.
Yeah, thank you for giving that feedback. I teach hundreds of people how to write grants, and I know a lot of times they like to be behind the document and just hide out, and then they don't want to go talk to the funder. So it's a really important reminder how valuable and imperative it is to build that relationship and not hide behind the paper. Fred or Steve, can you add what would be a pet peeve on an application, or a red flag that you don't want to see come through from this group?
I would just completely echo what Fred said, and I would say that's I would say that is not just unique to philanthropic dollars, either public or private. I think that even with government funding, and I'd love to hear what Marlene or Elisa have to say about this, but often it can be a faceless sort of exercise applying to government, but seeking out who is the person at the end of this who's going to be reading this and making a call or two is so valuable. And there's way more flexibility when you make that happen and build that relationship.
Yeah.
I guess the pet peeve for me is that I would say that foundations are to blame, or funders are to blame for this just as much as recipients of funding, is that people tend to lie to each other in applications and reports, and people think they are communicating what people want to hear about the successes of their programs, and funders are pretending that this is the true representation of what's actually going on, when everybody knows that's just that's not true. And if we were a little more honest about the real world exists and things change and adapt, and actually not pretending we're in a position where we are pretending that what is being said to each other in applications and proposals and reports is actually a reflection of the truth, is a much better way to impact change in a meaningful way. I mean, COVID's a perfect example of that, and I think probably deconstructed a lot of those barriers where everybody was suddenly comfortable with things being derailed and started to have much more honest conversations about it.
Yeah, that was incredible. Thank you for that perspective. Before we move to Marlene and Elisa, who I think will have a different perspective, Steve and Fred, we have a question from Julia that I'd like your thoughts on, which I guess, Fred, you just added it, but if the application doesn't matter because it's so relationship based first, why have that process in place? So could you answer that, Fred?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons, and it depends on the structure. There has to be, does there have to be? I don't know. There's a whole movement called trust-based philanthropy, which is trying to get away from a rigorous application process and more about what Steve was saying, with relationships that talk about what's really going on. At the same time, some foundations, the way they are still built, they need to have accountability. They need to be able to show their trustees in writing what it is they're supposed to be doing, and then whether those things are achieved or not. So there can be some value in written applications, and especially for large foundations that get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, you got to have some way to kind of sort through. But for me, I'm privileged in that I only do about 40 to 60 grants a year, so I can actually get to know people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Steve, would you add anything?
Yeah, well, at MakeWay, it's nominal, the amount of paperwork at this point. So it's for some of the reasons that Fred mentioned, is that there needs to be some sort of record. There is sort of public reporting. There's charitable law. We have to for charitable compliance, we have to demonstrate which grants were issued and for how much. So we need some sort of paper trail or a record. But for us, it's really a formality at the end, just to have a document of what's been discussed and talked about over meetings and conversations and coffees and teas or whatever it might be. And one of our mantras is when we talk to some of our grantees is that, okay, we're going to invite a proposal from you. It's very brief. If you take more than an hour, you're doing too much, really. This is, we understand already what's going on. This is just putting it down in bullet form so we all have something on record. But we've tried to minimize the paperwork as much as possible. And in many cases, we'll do the paperwork for grantees, where an elder will phone us up in their language. We have staff that can speak Indigenous languages. They will just transcribe that and write the proposal for them and so on. So we try to reduce those barriers as much as possible.
Thank you. That's great. Well, one other point I would add, Julia, that I think is important is that often the process of putting an application together forces you to actually think through the planning of how you're going to execute what you want to do. I know a lot of times we went from 0 to hero in just 3 to 4 weeks because we knew we wanted to hit a grant deadline, and a lot of very meaningful and important planning got done that would need to get done to be successful in the first place. So there is some value in that. I think it provides a little bit of structure for actually really thinking through the project planning process. So Marlene and Elisa, I expect you to have a different perspective coming from more of a federal government perspective. So can you share, I guess, what your pet peeves would be with applications or red flags, and or if you want to tag on to the conversation we were just having from Julia's question, you're welcome to go there as well. Marlene?
Hi, I would echo actually what Fred and Steve said about developing that relationship, and some it doesn't always guarantee success, but it would improve the quality of your proposal. And so not every program offers that, but I think if that is offered, then you would do well to take foundations or governments up on that offer to share early drafts, have a phone call about your idea, and then you can get some really early feedback that can help you not waste time and focus your energies appropriately to develop the best proposal you can. But in terms of pet peeves, I would just say, we, like I said, we're looking for community-based Indigenous-led projects. So proposals that come in that are very, very shiny and professional sounding and are clearly consultant-driven are a pet peeve and red flag. We're looking through that to try and see through that to see where is the community benefit, how much money is going to the actual community members, how much is going into the pockets of a consultant. So those are things I would just let you know that we are looking for.
Wonderful. Thank you for that insight. Elisa?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to echo what's already been said.
Or fortunately.
What Fred brought up, I would say it's not necessarily about building a relationship and building trust because, well, eventually it is, definitely. But from the get-go, to give you an idea, we have just put on 3 full-time staff to provide national support. And so if there are 574 federally recognized tribes eligible for this funding, and we receive a couple hundred applications, it's really, really difficult to take time to form relationships and trust with each individual applicant. But that being said, it is a pet peeve, if we get a proposal that's unfortunately pretty off base with the priorities of our mission and what we're meant to fund. And so yes, that relationship does help to be able to reach out ahead of time and ask questions about clarification on the solicitation and any confusion there might be, so that we can help increase transparency in the mission of our program. But I will say, in terms of the amount of technical assistance that we have tribal liaisons who are able to provide assistance with proposal, they're able to review proposals and stuff prior to submission. So they're non-federal, they're federally funded, but they're hired by partnering tribal organizations. And so they're able to provide more one-on-one support, whereas it might be a conflict of interest for us to provide one-on-one support with one tribe who applies, but not another. I mean, either that, if it's not a conflict of interest, then it's just capacity. I know that we're only allowed to talk about what's in the solicitation and not give any more information to one applicant who may be applying than another who didn't ask the question, if that makes sense. But yeah, just right. My pet peeves would be that they didn't reach out and ask a question first when we're like, oh, this could have been, this could have been a good fit, had this or that been mentioned. Or
Yeah, and I understand the nuances of what you're saying, because I've done a lot of US federal grants, understanding that often what you get isn't feeling like it's I can't go off of what you can read in the funding announcement. And that's a very different situation for Fred and Steve, who can have a different type of conversation out of a foundation. So very good, very interesting. There's been a great chat discussion. I think Marlene was able to answer that question about what if the consulting folks are Indigenous in the community. But so I think you answered that. For now, I'm going to go to the question that Josh asked, because I liked this. What is the best way to start these relationships in a time when connections are interrupted by COVID protocols? Can you weigh in on that? And let's start with Fred.
Well, in some ways, Zoom makes things so much easier. Like it used to be, I had to go to Alaska to meet with people, and I can just see them on the little screen here. So you can start that way. Sure, it's a lot better to have a beer in a bar with somebody, speaking as someone who drinks beer. But for now, Zoom's what we've got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Steve, do you have any other suggestions beyond Zoom?
Yeah, I think, and this is probably applies even pre-COVID, that's like, how do you just access the philanthropic world? Because, it's such a diversity of different foundations out there, figuring what their priorities are. It's always somewhat opaque on how do you access a specific foundation or get in touch with them. Some don't have open calls for proposals, all that sort of thing. So how do you do that? And it's all highly relationship based, as Fred said. You meet each other at a conference or a meeting or a community visit or so on and so forth. And how do you do that now? I don't know if I have great advice around that, other than just accessing networks. It's so, a Zoom call like this can be just as good as a conference, and maybe better, where you can just get into the DMs and direct message people and say, hey, nice panel presentation, I'm interested in your foundation, let's have a little Zoom on the side or something like that. And so I think it's all about networks with accessing philanthropic dollars. And we used to be able to do that in person. We'll do that again in person soon, hopefully. But in the meantime, it's using the various tools that are at our disposal now. So
right. Yeah,
don't ever be
absolutely.
shy to just reach out cold. I find is good advice.
I think I saw Elisa do a little hand motion, and I don't think she was saying rock on. I think she was saying take a phone call. Yeah. So that's good as well. The other tool I would recommend this group considers is Loom. Has anyone here in the chat box have you used Loom videos or received them? Do you know what they are? Right, the idea that you can basically shoot a video anywhere from 30 seconds, 5 minutes, whatever, make the video, you can screen share. And that has been game changing, because I can have their website up and be able to point to, oh, this is where I have a question, can you add context to that? And it doesn't require syncing your schedules. You can shoot Loom videos back and forth. So that's pretty game changing. So if this group hasn't experienced that yet, it's a nice way to add personal touch. All right, so I'd like to move to this question, because this is something we've been bringing up a lot in our project planning and funding research portion of our grant writing training. The group is discussing how organizational and program, basically how can the organization and these programs that are running ongoing be sustainable beyond grant funding? How else have you seen tribal-based organizations call in more diverse funding sources? So do you have any examples of tribal-based organizations that are being very creative, not only using grants to fund their work? I'm going to leave that open to either of the four of you if you want to hop in and add context.
Yeah, I can jump in just, and this is sort of specific. So in Canada right now, with a lot of Indigenous organizations or communities or governments moving ahead with large-scale Indigenous stewardship / conservation efforts, really efforts to protect in some way parts of their homelands, but also have long-term sustainable livelihoods responsible for, so jobs created in community to steward and manage these areas. and create sort of business opportunities associated with conservation. There's a real movement towards long-term sustainable financing of that sort of thing. Like, it's great to create these jobs now, but if these jobs are dependent on 3-year grants or contribution agreements for governments or philanthropy, then we've got no sustainability there. So large movement towards either using philanthropy to seed and attract other dollars for endowment funds or sinking funds, long-term sinking funds. And there's a number of examples across the country with that, with some measures of success with those models working. It takes a lot of capital, but we've certainly, as MakeWay, made the argument with very conservative, in fact, our conservative federal government prior to this one, that those sorts of investments federally, while it's a big chunk of change up front, it actually is much less over time, just like because you're not on the hook for funding this with constant contribution agreements at some point. It's just a one-time investment of dollars and the money works for itself. So you're putting yourself at the mercy of global financial markets using most of these instruments, but that is one of the challenges with those sorts of approaches. So just one thought.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. Marlene or Fred or Lisa, do you have anything else you'd want to add? A specific project example, perhaps? Go ahead, Fred.
Well, we are doing the exact thing Steve was talking about with the Inuvialuit and lands in the eastern Yukon North Slope. We're creating a big trust fund. Philanthropy is putting in somewhere between 3 and 5 million, and Environment Climate Change Canada is going to hopefully put it in around 30 million, and that'll generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million a year for in perpetuity for their stewardship program of that area. This problem, though, is not, I mean, it's a little, it's something that is inherent in every sort of NGO activity. There's project funding to do a certain thing and get that over the line, but then how do you fund your organization? And groups do things like have high donor programs, membership programs, all of that kind of traditional stuff. It's all hard to do. And there's only so many private dollars to go around. Being a tribal program or a government program, you may have some more access to federal dollars and provincial dollars than an NGO would ever have. But there isn't really like a magic formula, unfortunately.
Okay,
like we
so Fred, if you could figure that out, we'd really appreciate it.
Some groups do, right? But they have certain advantages. There's groups in the United States where there's a lot of money, and some groups can fund themselves quite well year after year after year by going after high donors and memberships. But smaller local community groups, it's so much harder. So just saying, there's not a lot of magic solutions to this. It's an ongoing problem.
I do want to draw some attention to the chat box because Aaron just gave a great example as well that echoes off what Fred had mentioned with this concept of cohorts coming together and building an endowment to support that long-term work. So I think this is something we at Learn Grant Writing are going to start learning about more, because this certainly seems like a better long-term solution where grants can augment but not be something we have to be super dependent on. All right, so let's move to the next question. We're actually almost running out of time. I want to make sure we're leaving it open if the group has a question, but someone in this cohort recommended I read this book when we got started a couple of weeks ago, Decolonizing Wealth, Indigenous Wisdom to Heal Divides and Restore Balance. It's been fabulous. Explained a lot of things I've been trying to understand. I think you've actually all of you have shared some really interesting perspectives on the question I'm about to ask, but I'm curious what else you would add, which is, how is your organization decolonizing wealth? Does anyone want to take that first? Elisa?
Go ahead, Lisa.
I was just going to say, while going along with the Justice 40 initiative, which is to grant 40%, well, not necessarily grant, but that 40% of the, I guess, appropriations from that initiative are going to be dedicated for disadvantaged communities. And all of the communities or most of the communities that we serve, most of the federally recognized tribes are disadvantaged in some form or another. And so, yeah, I guess that's all I would say is that decolonizing it means serving those communities that have historical trauma and have a lot of just negative and horrible histories and atrocities that have happened to them, and lifting them up and acknowledging that they need to be prioritized. So
Yeah,
think-
definitely.
yeah.
And I think you're up against a different animal, a huge US Department, BIA agency versus our smaller foundations. So it's a different conversation and different systems to address. So Fred, you were going to hop in. Do you want to go ahead and add your perspective?
Well, I work for a family with wealth. A private family foundation really is the definition of white privilege. So the trustees of the foundation are really just beginning a journey about decolonization. So we're barely started. We're trying to do some things, but they're trying to work their way into doing more and getting trustees who are First Nations and advisors and maybe staff, and who knows, we have a ways to go, just to be really frank about it, because we were starting at -10 on that scale.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Steve, would you like to add anything?
I just see some hands up, so maybe we should just go to questions, just give them the time.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Josh, would you like to unmute?
Yes, thank you guys. As I'm listening to you guys, losing my train of thought, but I really wanted to ask before we're out of time here for you guys, what do you guys want to see out of people like me just starting out into looking for funding and grants to kind of progress all the climate change and environment? And I want to know what you guys want to see from the bottom to top. What's going to grab that attention? Because I'm out there and I'm making small proposals and making contacts and relationships, and hopefully you guys are hearing more from me. But I want to know what stands out for you guys. Are you guys going to look out for me in my orange sweater, or if I'm coming to these meetings and asking the tough questions, if you guys can just give me a little insight, and then I can keep going.
Great. I loved that question. That was great. So how about Marlene? Do you want to take that?
Do you mean in the proposals, Josh? Or do you mean?
Well, yeah,
What do you mean?
in proposals, but in general, as we're talking about building relationships and proposals, and I find it's very much that of who I'm talking to and where those proposals are going to go, because as I'm writing them, they they have to go to someone to present to and get everybody else involved, because in the end we can't do it ourselves. So I'm just curious, what would grab your attention?
Yeah, I think that's a little tough, because the way our program operates is very much like, what do you want to see is what is going to drive what's going forward. So who have you talked to in your own community to discuss this idea? Who's behind the idea? Did you talk to your leadership? Did you talk to your youth and your elders? And that kind of like collaborative community voice, maybe there's multiple communities and voices, would strengthen your proposal and say, this is what we want, this is why. And I feel like that is persuasive. So it's not like I guess I'm flipping that a little bit.
That makes sense, and I agree. Going to the community and getting a stronger voice with more people and having more, that definitely makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Steve, would you add anything? Oh, sorry, Marlene. Okay. Steve, would you add anything to Josh's question?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and I think more generally for MakeWay, it's less really about the project or the initiatives or the activities and so on. That comes later. The initial ingredients is there. a really good person at the heart of this, or a collection of good people that have the leadership, the drive, the vision to make this happen. And then, we don't really care if the idea is fully formed. We can help invest in the people so that they can fully form that idea. But it's really about is the person or the collection of people there at the center of this who are really motivated and want to get something done and are positive sort of role models and leaders. That's the fundamental ingredient for us.
Absolutely. We are on the hour, but I want to just fit in one more question if you all can go for that, because they're coming in and they're really good. Monica wanted to ask, would it be beneficial then to include support statements of the proposal from communities and community members specifically?
Yes, we like to see tribal resolutions. They're not required, but I mean, that says, hey, we're on board and we're gonna support this effort, and it increases the likelihood that it's going to not fall short after the first year and fall through the cracks, especially as tribal administrations change so quickly. Having that resolution, it matters. So
yeah, and thank you, Marlene, for adding commentary in the chat. Okay, we're gonna give everyone a quick update on where they need to be working on their grant writing course, and we'll close out with one final question. So as you're all working your way through your course content, you submitted your draft funding strategy. Alexis is going through those. She'll be making you Loom videos with feedback. And then next up, you're getting started on the Writing Winning Grants module. So 7-step approach to that. And so have fun watching your course content, stay on top of it. And then that's all we have for a quick kind of logistics update. Let's close out with our final question to our panelists, which is, what is the final nugget of advice that you want this group to take away from today's panel discussion? Marlene, would you be willing to lead?
Yeah, I think I want to circle back to what Fred originally said, and we all echoed, which is like, reach out to the funder early with your project idea. I think that would serve you well, and make sure your package is complete. Don't leave sections empty.
Okay, great advice. All right, Fred.
There's an old saying, when you've met one foundation, you've met one foundation. They're all very different. And so the thing about reaching out is that also helps you save a lot of time, because you talk to somebody and they go, yeah, love what you're doing, but it's not what we fund. So you got to do that reach out.
Cool. Thank you for that. Tia's giving you thumbs up. All right, Elisa.
Yeah, I threw our email in the chat, our group email for our program, same as Marlene, just reaching out early with questions, yeah.
Okay, so Steve, you can't say reach out with questions. Give them one nugget. Though that's the point has been made. Definitely, it's a good one. It's a huge takeaway. But Steve, what else would you offer?
I would just build on what I said before, that the objectives, all the sort of the proposals speak around objectives, activities, deliverables, milestones, all that stuff is important, but it can come later. Like lead with people.
Okay.
Who are you? Who's your organization? Who are the people behind this? And often application forms don't have the room to even express that sort of stuff. So unfortunately, reach out, get in touch, try to get some face time.
Okay, lead with the people. I love that. Let's leave on that note. Lead with the people. That was beautiful. Thank you so very much for participating in this, sharing your amazing knowledge. I know that you've taught me a few new things. You got some claps in the Zoom, right? Lots of really joyful chat conversation. So thank you very much. If there's anything else you want to add, you're welcome to say that. But otherwise, I think we can wrap this party up. Oh, wait, did she? Yeah, Marlene had a bounce. So anyway, thank you so very much for your contributions. You've definitely helped get some stronger proposals heading your way.
Meredith, can I just quickly say, so I'm interested in making more opportunities like this. So I'd be interested in hearing, and I'll throw my email in the chat, ways that we can have these kinds of dialogues. I'm thinking, in Alaska, Alaska Conference of Tribal Environmental Management happens every year. Couldn't we do a funders dialogue where there's back and forth like that every year, and bring in different folks like these kind of people? So if people are interested in that idea, let me know what you think about it.
Totally. Yep. Aaron will throw his email in the chat box. Fantastic. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for adding your gratitude in the chat box so your funder panelists can see it. They are, I think they're feeling that energy. I know I can. And with that, everyone go forth and have a very strong and beautiful Wednesday, and we'll catch you next week. All
Thank you.
righty.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. See you.
Bye.